Welcome to the We Rise podcast, where we are building collective resilience. I'm your host, Christine Gyovai, business owner, wife, mother of two, paddleboarder, and I love working with communities across the nation. Join me as I share stories and strategies to inspire action to build resilience and community transformation. From the Navajo Nation to the mountains of Appalachia, incredible work is being done by community members and leaders. I'm excited to share more on the podcast today. Welcome. Greetings. Welcome to the We Rise podcast. I am so glad you're here. I'm looking forward to sharing a bit today about the power of listening, how key it is, and how it plays a strong role in my own life. Listening is a strategy that helps build connection, relationships, and the resilience of individual people, teams, and it can transform communities. As a society, listening to others has been central both to culture and community for millennia. The background of the world-famous International Storytelling Festival, which takes place in Jonesboro, Tennessee, is beautiful. This story of their beginnings is drawn from the website storytellingcenter.net, which shares throughout the world, in every culture, people have told stories at home and at work. When the harvest was taken in, the wood was cut and carted, and the wool was woven. And while the folk were telling their stories, so too were the bards and the minstrels, the griots and the troubadours, who were the poets, singers, and guardians of a people's history. It continues. Today, we still enjoy stories, listening to them, telling them as deeply as did our ancestors, for our lives are bound together with stories. The tales, perhaps ever so ordinary, that seem to catch us up in some obscure, almost magical way and help us make sense of our world. And since our lives are still intertwined with stories, it would seem that the art of storytelling should have a forever unchanging place and honor in our history and culture. Yet, this is not so. Despite its ageless power and importance, this ancient folk art has, until recently, been forgotten, lost in a sea of print, film, and videotape that is testimony to the media's skill at filling us up with images and ideas that were once the province of the oral tradition. But during the late 1960s and early 1970s, there emerged throughout America a realization that we were losing our connection to the genuine one-on-one communication of the told tale. The seeds for a reawakening of interest in the oral tradition were being sown. And in 1973, in a tiny Tennessee town, something happened that rekindled our national appreciation of the told story, and it became the spark plug for a major cultural movement, the rebirth of the art of storytelling. And this wonderful story concludes, it began serendipitously in Jonesboro, Tennessee, a 200-year-old town in the heart of southern Appalachian Mountains. On the second Saturday night in October of 1973, Jerry Clower, a Mississippi coon hunter and storyteller, leapt to the stage in a hot, jammed high school gymnasium and told tales to more than 1,000 East Tennesseans. And they listened. I love this story. And you can learn more about the remarkable background of the International Storytelling Festival and the Storytelling Center at the website, storytellingcenter.net. So in my own 20 years plus of working as a mediator and a facilitator with communities across the United States, there are a few tools that I have found as important as simply listening. To truly hear someone, deeply giving them the space to speak and say what's on their heart and mind, is to offer something extremely powerful. To give someone your full attention and your presence. At the same time, listening is one of the most underused tools that we have available, but it's free. It costs absolutely nothing to do, but it's one of the most effective tools that we have for resolving conflict, improving mental health, building connection and community, and decreasing isolation. In a Forbes piece called How Important is Listening, Really?, author Christina Holbrook McEntee writes that most of us don't really listen very well, or if we do manage to listen, we're often just waiting until the other person finishes so that we can say what's on our mind. And that's not really listening. Over time, the result of this is that we seal ourselves off from other people. We don't really know them or really understand their concerns. Eventually, as our lives move on, we become more and more isolated. Writer Brenda Ueland, in her essay on the fine art of listening, writes, "Listening is a magnetic and strange thing, a creative force. The people who really listen to us are the ones that we move towards, and we want to sit in their radius as though it did us good. When we listen," Ueland remarks, "we allow the creative fountain to start up, the spirit, the intelligence, the imagination. And by not listening, whether it be in business or personal life, that fountain will run dry. So beautifully said. But at the same time, listening is hard, and it really is not the same thing as hearing. Many of us just haven't developed the habits to become effective or deep listeners, but we can. More broadly, we as a society are accustomed to trying to get the last word in, to proving our point, to just waiting until the other person has finished speaking until we have a chance to say what's on our mind. Sometimes deep listening can feel a bit foreign. Collectively, we aren't used to just listening for the sake of listening, to seeing what is important to another person and to bring our full attention to them, our presence. At the same time, it's one of the most critical things we can do because it makes us better parents, better team players, better leaders, and better partners. In my work with communities, I've experienced many community members that aren't able to move past saying the same thing over and over again because they haven't felt truly heard. When I've sat and been present, not having an agenda of my own, but listening to what another says fully and deeply, I've experienced people being able to move past their own sense of isolation and feeling disconnected to feeling connected and being able to relate to others. And it is such a powerful thing to witness. Deep listening and feeling heard allows for connecting and building relationships. Listening helps people know that their voice matters, and it gives them the space and the opportunity to connect with others, which is often much easier after they've been truly heard. It's really hard to overstate how important listening truly is. Building collective resilience looks different in different places. What stories and strategies inspire you? Share your ideas with us on social media and check out our website at yeswerise.org to find the show notes, interview videos, and the links mentioned on the podcast today. In a fabulous talk on deep listening, teacher Tara Brach shares that 85% of what we know we've learned from listening, but 75% of the time we're distracted, preoccupied, or forgetful. After 1 hour of listening, we can often recall only 20% of what we've heard. And at the same time, the average person only listens at 25% efficiency. Moreover, our human attention span has dropped to 8 seconds, down from 12 seconds in 2000, which is quite a drop. And I love this. Our attention span is 1 second lower than that of a goldfish. Can you believe it? Tara Brach also notes that numerous studies show the effect of technology on our brain. The brain gets used to dividing attention and shifting quickly, which creates an addiction to novelty. We constantly check for something new, a new ding, a new beep, a new text. The searching for novelty can actually be detrimental to us as a whole. Research shows it on average takes 23 minutes to return to the task at hand after an interruption. The same can be true of listening. It takes a long time to remember what someone was saying after an interruption. When we listen deeply, when we set interruptions and distractions aside and turn our full attention to another person, we can actually create more space, not only to deepen relationships, but to also allow new opportunities to surface. If you want to stand out as a leader, a good place to begin is by listening, Richard Branson said. Great listeners are often terrific at uncovering and putting in place strategies and plans that have a big impact. In my life, our children are 11 and 13, and we actively work with them to help build their listening skills. On a recent foggy morning, they were trying to make pancakes together for breakfast. Our daughter, Maya Grace, didn't think that measuring ingredients was needed, trusting herself to eyeball the ingredients to her own satisfaction. But our son Elijah wanted to measure the ingredients with a measuring cup, and he really didn't like his sister's idea. With increasing frustration, Elijah kept telling Maya Grace she needed to get the measuring cups. She resisted, continued baking, and their small argument turned into a big one. When we talked about it, after actually eating the pancakes, I asked each of the kids what they felt like would have made the morning go better for each of them. Elijah said it would have been helpful if Maya Grace had listened to him. He was frustrated as he felt he wasn't being heard. But Maya Grace wanted Elijah to ask for her opinion instead of telling her what to do. Ultimately, they both felt frustrated and neither felt heard. They both agreed later that sharing what was important to the other one and listening would have been much more helpful than the way things ultimately unfolded. But it is hard to listen deeply, to put aside our own opinions, stories, and even thoughts and just hear what a person has to say. Yet, when we bring our full presence to listen to another person, we are offering them a gift. For those who are wondering how to improve their skills, here are a few strategies for listening deeply. Sometimes called active listening or reflective listening. Through listening deeply, the listener actually allows the person to share what's important to them and to share fully. When we're talking with someone, maintaining eye contact really helps if it's culturally appropriate. Or giving a verbal cue that you can hear a person without interrupting them and waiting until someone is finished before starting to speak. When a person shares what's important to them or offers their thoughts or opinions, if we let our own thoughts flow past us but don't latch onto specific thoughts, it can help us to be more present with what the other person is saying. And after someone has spoken, reflecting back to them what we heard in their own words can be one of the most important tools that we can use. Then we can ask them, hey, did I get that right? Or is there more? When I'm facilitating community meetings and a participant is visibly frustrated, I usually completely pause what I'm doing to focus on them. If I don't, they often will continue to repeat what they're saying throughout the meeting, often railroading future progress or causing disruptions down the road. And beyond that, it's important to just listen for the sake of listening. At a recent community meeting about downtown revitalization, a participant joined the meeting late. It wasn't ideal as she missed most of the introductions and hearing what people shared about what they love about their community, which was a lot. The sharing had built a strong sense of connection among participants. When it was her opportunity to introduce herself, the latecomer went into several minutes of her frustrations about the downtown areas in the community, and especially the antique and tchotchke shops. Her thoughts were a welcome part of the meeting, but if she heard the overview at the beginning of the meeting, she would have known that we would have gone into small group discussions to hear each other in more depth. She might not have felt the pressure to say everything at once at the beginning of the meeting. She also might have heard that those antique shops were actually really important to some others in the group. However, as she spoke, I paused writing what she was saying on a flip chart and turned my body to give her my full attention. Gave her eye contact and I listened. After she shared, I reflected back what I heard in her own words, that she was frustrated with all the antique shops and she had specific ideas for how the downtown needed to grow and develop, and she wanted to see solid progress. I asked her if there was more. She shared a few more things. After I listened, she gave a big sigh as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. It was an awkward moment for the other participants as the feeling of what she was sharing was fairly different from what had been shared earlier. But through me listening to her deeply, she was able to share what she wanted to and then become an active participant in the conversation at hand, rather than reiterating what was frustrating to her. It was a telling moment about the power of listening. Author Christina Holbrook McEntee writes about listening. You don't need to do this perfectly for the results to be quite remarkable. All of us want to be listened to. All of us want to really be heard. When someone senses you're really listening to what they have to say, amazing things can happen. Solutions can be found that were never imagined. Understanding can be reached that had seemed impossible. Old angers and resentments can be overcome, and frustrations can simply fall away. So now we find new opportunities to speak and to listen. And to circle around back to the beginning of this piece, as part of the International Storytelling Festival, the Young Appalachian Storytelling Summit is coming up in August of 2021. It's a young adult-led event that focuses on a critical issue: how young adults can use storytelling as a leadership tool to create Appalachia's future. Summit participants have the opportunity to hear from diverse voices within Appalachia, to understand how storytelling can help them take action in their own communities, and to join a network of like-minded young Appalachians to collaborate with beyond the event. Find out more about the summit, called Crossroads, at the website storytellingcenter.net. So listen on and listen deeply. Offer a gift that is free, is deeply needed, and often extremely appreciated. Thank you for joining the We Rise podcast. To learn more about the stories and speakers featured in this episode, check out our website at yeswerise.org. You'll find the show notes, interview videos, the links mentioned today, and you can join our email list. Subscribe to the show to catch every new episode and leave us a review or a rating. You can also find us on Facebook or Instagram at Collective Resilience We Rise to share your ideas. The Collective Resilience We Rise podcast is produced by Dialogue and Design Associates, podcasting for creatives, with music by Drishti Beats. Thanks so much for listening.